My name is Helen Marlowe. I'm a mother, a widow, and the trustee of a $2.5 million family trust. I am 61, with the kind of gray that shows up first at the temples and refuses to leave. The night my son Noah looked across his polished Queen Anne living room in Seattle and said, "Mom, there isn't a place for you this Christmas." The words drifted down like feathers and landed like ice. I didn't bargain. I didn't beg. I stood, steadied the front of my coat, and told his wife, Alyssa, my daughter-in-law who prizes presentation more than honesty, to have a lovely holiday. If stories like this hit home, tap like and subscribe. Turn on the bell so you don't miss the next chapter. Your support helps other people find quiet courage. The room smelled like designer vanilla, the sort that pretends to be warmth. The tree stretched to the ceiling, all 12 feet of it, every ornament fresh out of a box. The money for it had once passed through my fingers. Noah studied the hardwood instead of my face. Alyssa watched my hands, as if kindness might try to reach for her again. I gave them the one gift they always accepted: silence. Outside, a thin snowfall softened Queen Anne Avenue, and the city lights smeared across damp glass. I walked the long hallway, where family photos can make a mother smaller with every passing year, touched the chilled brass lever, and stepped into air that tasted like a clean goodbye. Headlights sliced the falling flakes. The wipers kept a metronome. Windows glowed with other people's warmth. I didn't cry. I drove. My name is Helen. I married a carpenter who believed in steady work and soft words. When he died, I learned a new truth. Quiet can be a blade. I paid bills, balanced ledgers, and built a fund meant to anchor our family when storms pushed in. Then I learned some storms arrive with familiar faces. I parked in front of my small craftsman bungalow and let the engine tick itself to stillness. Snow dusted the windshield like ash. Justice doesn't holler. It waits. Gloves off. Phone on the counter. A look at the framed photo of the life I built and the table where I now eat alone. I promised myself something plain. If I wasn't welcome at their table, my money wouldn't sit at it either. I slept. 2 days later, my phone would blink with 27 missed calls. I remember the curtains most. Pale gold linen, heavy and hemmed. I helped choose the fabric when Noah and Alyssa first bought the house. She wanted something photogenic. She didn't know how to sew, so I finished the hems myself. I remember the ladder wobble and Noah holding pins, pretending to be useful. He smiled. It's a different quiet now. The curtains stayed, but I no longer had a place beneath them. That next morning, I opened an old file folder from the dresser. It was thick with receipts: Home Depot, Crate and Barrel, room and board, backsplash tile, light fixtures, custom frames. Their home had been my disguised retirement plan. Every choice, every tap of the card wore a coat of love and an unspoken expectation that there would be a chair for me at the table I helped set. I once paid their down payment when the loan came up short. Just until the bonuses hit, Noah had said. The bonus never arrived. I didn't press. I rarely did. Love made the quiet easier to explain away. A photograph sat on their mantel the night I was turned away. Noah, Alyssa, and the kids on a California beach in matching sweaters. I wasn't in it, but I had bought those sweaters. Back home, I stood in my hallway holding a framed picture of Noah at 7 inside a refrigerator box fort we built together. Wild hair, front tooth missing, joy like a flare. I used to believe that boy still lived somewhere inside the man who asked me not to come. Evidence fades. Every inch of their home carried my fingerprints. The bar stools, the French press, the hardwood repair after the dishwasher leak. I painted the nursery when Alyssa was too tired to stand. I bought the stroller she pushed through University Village like a badge. Strangers complimented. She never mentioned me. I stared at the records on my bed. My name wasn't on the deed or the mortgage, not even on the gift letters. But money flowed from me like an invisible vein feeding a body that no longer acknowledged the source. They said it was space, that there wasn't room for me, though I had made room again and again, financially, physically, emotionally. I downsized so they could afford the neighborhood. I babysat when they couldn't pay. I let their mistakes live rent-free inside my forgiveness. That morning, a sharp thought arrived. This wasn't an oversight. It was erasure. I sat at my smaller, older, but mine, dining table. I spread receipts like playing cards and stared until the ink looked like bruises. Love doesn't always bring a thank you. Disrespect often shows up wearing tradition. I felt no rage, only clarity. A long, steady unfurling of facts I had refused to see. I can still feel the cold of their front door lever. After Noah's sentence fell, I lingered in their hallway, not because I was uncertain, but because I wanted to memorize the exhibit. Family pictures had shifted over time. At first I was everywhere, holding babies, laughing in kitchens, then fewer, then smaller. By the end, I was a fuzzy figure in the back of a graduation shot, half hidden by flowers. I ran my finger over a frame. Dust thickened where no one bothered to reach. I used to clean that high. I used to be needed, even in the corners. Alyssa stood behind me, not close enough to touch. Her heels clicked once, a little metronome of ownership. I nodded toward the dining room. "Tell them," I said, "Merry Christmas. Not cruel, not hot, just finished." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Silence is a language we both speak. My scarf wrapped, my coat zipped to the chin. I stepped into the drift. The flakes gave up their fall onto my shoulders. Porch lights glowed. Inside glass, families gathered. Laughter lit like candles. Once I believed warmth like that was permanent. My boots whispered across salted steps. No one followed, no one looked. At the car, I took one breath long enough to count. I had cooked in that kitchen, changed diapers in that guest room, folded blankets on that couch. Now I left like a visitor who'd stayed too long. Only I hadn't. Back home, the engine hummed. Headlights pushed clean tunnels through the snow. In the rear view, I watched their house recede. Bright windows in every room, but none for me. I didn't cry. I put both hands on the wheel and made myself a place elsewhere. At my kitchen table, I set a yellow pad and a calculator that beeped too loud in the hush. The snow had stopped, but the stillness clung. I typed every figure carefully, like the old days when Mark, my husband, was alive, and we stretched meals and paid in exact cash. We had little, and we had enough, because we had each other. First line, $20,000, wired for the down payment when their appraisal came in low. Alyssa sobbed. "Dream house," she called it. Noah texted, "If you can, Mom, no pressure." I answered, "Of course." Then $7,000 for roof repair, $15,000 for the kitchen update, the recurring child care I never billed, the power bills I covered between paychecks. Add the credit card I let Noah use during pregnancy, never returned. Every holiday I brought more than gifts. I brought coverage. I totaled the numbers, then looked at my own balance. The gap bruised. I'd spent more lifting them than I had spent maintaining myself for a decade. I hadn't bought new shoes in 2 years. I skipped the dentist. I trimmed my own hair. I let a small roof leak fester because it only dripped in storms. I'd turned love into currency and spent it like interest would magically arrive. I remembered the second mortgage I signed when Noah's job vanished. The banker raised his brows, pen hovering. "Are you sure, Ms. Marlowe?" I was. I thought that's what mothers do. But mothers aren't firewood. We don't set ourselves aflame to keep someone else's holiday warm. The calculator screen blinked a total, $237,468. No interest, no price on chipped pieces of self. I slid the pad beside the trust binder. Love shouldn't need receipts. Sometimes you must tally the cost to understand the loss. Mark used to say the things I deflected until life proved him right. He never raised his voice. He believed truth doesn't need volume to carry weight. Once, after Noah borrowed money and forgot a thank you, Mark poured me tea and murmured, "Don't buy love, hell. Earn respect, or teach people how to." I waved him off. He's young, he's stressed, he means well. Mark just smiled into his mug and said nothing else. That memory found me again in the international aisle of the co-op, staring at a fancy tin of cocoa I used to treat myself to every winter. I held it, turned it over, put it back. I'd been denying small joys for years, passing over soft scarves, fresh gloves, birthday cakes, trial-size perfume, because they needed more. That was the story. In that aisle, something shifted. Not bitterness, recognition. I had trained myself to believe less for me meant more for them, that each declined comfort was proof of love. I edited myself out of ease and named it motherhood. At home, I climbed the hall stool and pulled down the photo box. Wedding pictures, vacation postcards, school art. Our 20th anniversary snapshot surfaced. Mark in a navy sweater, holding my hand by a lake. He'd written, "Still with you, even when I'm not." I framed it and set it on the mantel. For years, I let other people's wants drown out his wisdom. In the quiet now, I could hear him again. Real love doesn't need receipts, but it does require boundaries. The living room held nothing new, nothing matched, but everything was mine. A knit throw, a stack of library books, a lamp with a crooked shade, an honest quiet. Snow started again, soft and forgiving. "You were right," I whispered to Mark's picture. I kept buying silence. The phone rang just after noon, Alyssa's name. I let it buzz once before answering. "Hi, Helen," she sang, sugar with static. "Staying warm?" Pause, the kind that tells you the real reason she called. "My parents fly in next week. We're hosting a small dinner, just close friends. They prefer things refined, traditional." I held the phone away from my ear, smiled without teeth. I remember when traditional meant casserole and pie. She laughed, not quite landing. "Right, well, we've evolved. Noah agrees. It'll be lovely." I listened to the clink of glass and a florist being directed in the background. "If you come," she added, "we'd appreciate something understated, maybe navy, and perhaps avoid mention of past Christmases. It keeps the energy light." I could feel her staging the evening like a showroom. Nothing too sentimental, nothing real, no chipped teacups, no handwritten recipes, no reminders of where the foundation came from. I remembered sitting with Noah through croup and Christmas Eves, the veil I hand-sewed for Alyssa because paying the boutique felt foolish. "What exactly do your parents expect from me?" I asked, flat as a table. "Just that you be gracious after everything," she said. "Gracious," I repeated. "Like when I made your wedding veil so you didn't spend the extra $500? That was different," she snapped. "We were young. We were appreciative." "And now?" I asked. Silence. I folded a cloth napkin into a sharp square. Refined enough to eat my food when money was tight, but not refined enough to share a table with me now. "That's not fair," she shot back. "No," I said. "That's precise." Another pause. "Just think about it," she tried again, the glaze returning. "It's important to us." "Of course," I said. "I'll take care of everything." I hung up, then let the quiet return. The second call arrived that evening while lentils simmered. "Quick thing," Alyssa said, brisk now. Dad asked who else would be at dinner. He mentioned your late husband. Mark, was it? I leaned against the counter. It was. It's just good to know who might be discussed. My parents are careful with legacy. They come from a world where everyone understands their place. Mark knew his place, didn't he? Hard-working, simple, the kind people remember but quietly. The spoon paused. My knuckles whitened. I set it down and lifted the phone with both hands. Mark carried more grace in his silence than your family has managed in all its noise. She exhaled, startled. Helen, I didn't... We're done pretending, I said. Pretending I'm welcome. Pretending this is mutual. Pretending tradition is anything but control with better dishes. You're blowing this out of proportion. No, I answered, and even I admired how steady it came out. I'm seeing it in proportion for the first time. She shifted tactics. If you don't come, people will notice. Let them. You'll regret this. No, I said, calm and final, but I suspect you might. I ended the call. Morning found me early, before the sky turned pewter, before the neighborhood breathed. Black coffee, no sugar. Snow clung to the window corners, melting slow like hesitation. The trust binder waited. Worn edges, brown leather. Mark and I assembled it years ago when growing old alone was a shadow, not a shape. Prepare while you still feel strong, he'd said. He was right. I flipped to the section my fingers knew before my eyes. Clause 8.2. If the trustee identifies manipulation, coercion, misuse, or negligence that threatens the trust's intent, the trustee may, without beneficiary consent, suspend distributions and freeze access until review and resolution. I read it twice. Then I called. Sound and Summit Fiduciary Services, a calm voice answered. This is Carla. This is Helen Marlowe, trustee of the Marlowe Family Trust. I need to initiate a freeze on the primary account. Keys clacked. Printers hummed somewhere far away. Yes, Ms. Marlowe, she said. You're listed as sole trustee with full authority. Is this due to suspected misuse? It's due to repeated disrespect that's evolved into neglect, I said. Clause 8.2 covers both. A professional pause, process, not doubt. Understood. We'll mark the distribution schedule as suspended immediately. That includes debit activity, standing transfers, and joint use cards. Would you like confirmation when complete? No, I said, gentler than I felt. I already know it's the right decision. I ended the call and set the phone down like the last page of a book I took too long to finish. My hands didn't shake. For years I had handed out wires, envelopes, lifelines, funding birthdays I wasn't invited to, and vacations I only witnessed on Instagram. I told myself, generosity equals safety. But love without respect is a transaction, not family. I was done bankrolling my own disappearance. I went to the desk. Out came the trust summaries, bank statements, gift letters, tax returns, neat stacks. I reached for a black pen and wrote 3 words across the top page. Suspended until notice. The cap clicked home. Stillness washed in. Not grief, not guilt. Something sturdier. They had mistaken my quiet for consent. Now they would learn it was preparation. That evening I laid a fire. I hadn't used the fireplace in years. It was more memorial than heat. Mark used to set logs with a carpenter's eye, cross-hatched, kindling tucked, 1 match. Flame caught slow, then quick. I sat on the rug and fed it paper. Old duplicates, phone notes from calls never returned. A photo of Noah and Alyssa grinning in front of the house I helped them buy, smiles floating as if lives didn't need roots. The fire didn't rage. It breathed. I opened a bottle I'd saved for someday, poured it into my favorite glass with a tiny chip, and let the crackle warm my skin. The room was small, cluttered with second-hand comforts and honest books. Nothing made a statement. Everything carried a story. I didn't watch the clock. I didn't wait for a call. I didn't check the mail for thanks that never came. I sat in my peace. I thought about meals cooked for people who didn't stay, about all the yeses I gave because explaining hurt was harder, about emails I wasn't copied on and decisions made without me, the smiles that didn't reach the eyes when I entered a room. Something had changed. Not them. Me. The flames gentled to coals. I let one last paper fall, an old to-do list with birthdays circled. I remember their dates. I just won't chase them with gifts. I leaned back in the chair Mark called his thinking seat. Dry wine sat warm in my chest. The room breathed with me. For the first time in years, Christmas Eve would be mine. No debt dressed as duty, just a fireplace and a glass of red, and the quiet joy of choosing myself. The next morning a text arrived, bright as a sticker. "Hi, Helen. Quick favor. Could you pick up my parents from C at 2:00 p.m.? Wear something decent. Thanks." No greeting, no question mark, just assumption, wrapped in a smiley face. I read it twice and set the phone beside my coffee. Ash cooled in the hearth. Cedar ghosted the air. A clean sheet of snow sat on the porch rail. Requests disguised as niceties. Expectations camouflaged as courtesy. I lifted the phone again and typed, "Of course. I'll take care of everything." I sent it. Not because I would, but because sometimes compliance is camouflage. I pulled out my winter coat, dusted the sleeves. I clicked open my leather case and checked the folders. Trust documents, bank letters, printed screenshots, labeled and squared. At 12:15, I brewed more coffee. At 12:40, I ironed my navy blouse, the same one I wore the day I signed the trustee papers. At 1 o'clock, I sat, opened a crossword, and circled a clue. Delayed gratification. 7. I wrote postpone one box at a time and smiled. Help comes in many shapes. Some favors pay interest. I didn't go to the airport. At 2 p.m., I poured another cup, turned the crossword page. The kitchen ticked. The heater hummed. Another clue. Something kept waiting on purpose. 8. I wrote deferred. The mug in my hands was chipped near the base. A small imperfection I'd stopped noticing. Alyssa once said it matched nothing. That's why I liked it. Things don't need permission to belong. By 2:15, the first call came. I let it ring. I counted the folders again. 14, one for each dinner guest. Labeled, numbered, statements, letters, dates, signatures. Truth doesn't need decoration, only order. At 2:47, Noah called, then again and again. I let the screen light and fade. At 3:45, 5 calls stacked. I powered the phone off. Silence had weight, but not the punishing kind, the space-making kind. I rinsed the mug. The dish towel smelled faintly of lavender, the scent Mark liked in his drawers. Some things don't ask to be noticed. They just soften the air. I lit a candle on the sill, not for show, but because I liked how flame beats back gray. At 4 and I set out bread and butter. At 5 the snow thickened. I stood at the window watching spirals of white. Cars moved carefully. Everyone was going somewhere. I stayed put. At 5:15, I brewed Earl Grey and set a table for one. Cloth napkin, ceramic mug, lemon wedges. I folded the napkin into thirds, the way I used to when guests came. No guests now, and I didn't mind. The phone buzzed again. I didn't flip it. By 5:32, it pulsed 4 times. Noah, then Alyssa, then Noah, then an unknown number. Likely Celeste or Graham, Alyssa's parents. I lifted the tea. Bergamot and memory rose like steam. I took a slow sip. I wasn't angry. I was somewhere quieter and stronger than anger, a place they don't know how to reach. Just before 6, the first voicemail. Alyssa, clipped and cold. We've been waiting over 3 hours. My parents are furious. You said you'd handle it. Then Noah's voice, unpolished. Mom, call me. We have to figure this out. But there was nothing to figure out. They had organized the seating chart a long time ago and left my chair off. I washed the cup, dried it on the lavender towel. Evening moved gently, the way it does after truth speaks. At 7:18, the calls got frantic. I flipped the phone face down. They didn't know what had changed yet, only that something had. By 8:10, the snow was laying a soft quilt across the city. A lamp glowed in the corner. The folders rested on the coffee table like a choir of paper, ready to sing. I didn't open them. Truth was ready. It didn't require urgency, just timing. The screen lit one last time. I rolled it over. 27 missed calls. I said the number out loud and smiled. Freedom often looks like silence on a screen. I made grilled cheese and tomato soup. Simple, steady, warm. The kind of dinner Noah used to beg for when the weather turned. Back then, he'd ask if the cheese would stretch when he pulled the halves apart. I always made sure it did. Tonight, the only sound was butter hissing in a pan. I ate slowly, both hands wrapped around the bowl. Outside, powdered sugar dusted the porch rail. I thought about all the holiday banquets I helped prepare. The roasts, the pies, the wiped counters, watching the conversation drift to places I didn't belong. There had always been a center. I had always kept the corners neat. Tonight, the center was mine. I cleaned the kitchen. Peace doesn't always look epic. Sometimes it's a dry sink and a warm plate. The world outside exhaled. Inside, I had already taken my first full breath in years. The pounding started just after 5. Fists, not knuckles. I had just finished the dishes. I didn't rush. I dried my hands, folded the towel just so, and looked around. Everything where it belonged. Another volley on the door. I pulled the curtain aside. Graham stood in a dark overcoat, face red with cold and fury. Celeste's mouth had vanished into a line. Alyssa in the middle, coat half-buttoned, exhaustion curdling into disbelief. I cracked the door, didn't swing it wide. Evening, I said, flame calm. Graham exploded. We were stranded at the airport for hours. 4, Celeste snapped. Among strangers. No call, no apology. Barbaric, Helen. It's cold, I said. Come in. No reason to alarm the neighbors. They entered stiff as hat stands. No one said thank you. I led them into the living room. The low burn painted the walls honey. I gestured toward the couch. They remained standing. Alyssa blinked like she was searching for a woman I had stopped being. You agreed, she said. I did, I said. I just didn't show up where you expected. Graham stepped closer. You humiliated us. We are respected in this community. He said respected like it came with a deed. Stranded? I poured myself water. Seems like you were simply unsupervised for a spell, Celeste gasped. How dare you? How long? I asked mildly. Have I let you speak to me like something below crystal? They blinked. Alyssa, soft as paper. You've changed. No, I said, sipping. I remembered who I was, before you decided who I should be. They came for an apology, for a flustered explanation wrapped in baked goods and small guilt. I had none. I opened the closet and held out their coats. You're welcome to tea, I said, but I suspect you didn't come for peace, and I'm not offering war. Graham snatched his sleeves. You'll regret this. I already did, I said, and paused. Alyssa studied her shoes. Celeste bundled her scarf, as if my home had lowered the temperature. At the door, I added, whatever you felt while you were inside my house tonight, remember it. They left without looking back. The engine revved, tires skated on the frozen rim and caught. The street went quiet again. My phone hummed on the side table. Not a call, a message. We have connections in Seattle. Be careful how you carry yourself. Celeste was never subtle. Her threats wore pearls. I turned the phone off, stirred the embers, and whispered to the room, "It's quieter without you." Outside, the snow kept building, not loud, just inevitable. Some threats melt faster than flakes. Some silences sound louder than slammed doors. 3 days later at the corner market, a folded Seattle Herald lay near the mints. A grainy photo of me sliding into my car in the snow. The headline, "Businesswoman Abandons Elderly Couple in Holiday Storm." I blinked. The high had been 52 degrees that day. I bought the paper, spread it on my table, and read every line. I didn't recognize the woman they described. According to the piece, I'd failed to pick up Celeste and Graham, leaving them stranded in freezing conditions without warning. Vague nods to generational neglect and shocking disregard for tradition. An anonymous source said, "It's heartbreaking to watch someone who once gave so much become so cold." Not heartbreak, precision. They weren't just mad. They were strategic. They were writing the story before the ink ran dry. The byline, Paige Lawson, staff writer. The name rang a small bell. Back home I searched. LinkedIn, publicists, editors, 2 local consultants, and Noah. They revised the weather, and they tried to revise me. I circled a line in red. A long-standing family agreement was violated. Agreement? There had never been one. Only expectations and a silent contract where I gave and they took. No one asked what I needed, whether I had boundaries. They assumed I had none. I opened a drawer and pulled the binder again. Dates, transfers, emails, voicemails, all the quiet proof of how my presence was funded and my person erased. They had ink. I had records. I didn't need to scream. I needed to speak on my terms. I drafted an email. Subject, correction request. Baker article. Dear Ms. Lawson, I read your piece dated December 21st. I'm the woman in the photo, Helen Marlowe. I request a formal correction. Attached. Screenshot of the pickup text. Weather report. High 52 degrees, no wind. Call log showing 27 missed calls. Documentation of my status as sole trustee of the Marlowe Family Trust. Copy of Clause 8.2, authorizing suspension. Your readers deserve the truth, and good journalism does too. Sincerely, Helen Marlowe. Attachments checked twice. Send. Silence is not always absence. Sometimes it's confidence. I closed the laptop and drew the curtains. Streetlights turned snow into glitter. The world didn't care what a column insisted, but I did. No reply by the next evening. No correction. No apology. Fine. I opened a new folder. Public record. Inside went the article, my email, attachments, timestamps, and a fresh page. Distribution plan. If they wanted public, I would answer public. Not with gossip. With documentation. Morning ribbon through the kitchen. I didn't rush coffee. I laid out paper truth. Bank statements highlighting transfers to Noah or Alyssa over 5 years. Deposit confirmations. Gift letters I'd signed to patch their mortgage. Grocery orders when they forgot a wallet. The room and board receipt I covered on my account. The Amazon cart they promised to reimburse. I printed Alyssa's old email. You're a lifesaver, Helen. I don't know what we'd do without you. They had forgotten. I hadn't. I printed their curated social posts too. Lavish showers with tagged sponsors, and thanks to everyone but me. I printed my call log, all 27 time-stamped misses. I printed the weather screen for the day of the blizzard. Partly cloudy, 52. I circled unseasonably warm. At the bottom I wrote, they called it a storm. I clipped, labeled, stacked, 14 identical folders. Bank, legal, weather, screenshots, emails, truth without perfume. I set them in a black leather case with clean edges, looped a red ribbon around the handle. I checked the calendar. December 24th, circled in red. They had chosen the staging: a long table, gold flatware, careful playlists, name cards with coded meanings. I would choose the terms. 6:30 p.m. was the announced seating time in the email Alyssa sent 2 weeks ago, complete with a seating chart that listed me as TBD. Now I knew exactly where I belonged. I set the case by the door. The evening of December 24th, I arrived at their Queen Anne home at 6:45 sharp. The house stood proud as always, glowing with warm light from every window. A wreath was fixed perfectly on the door, and strains of soft jazz trickled out whenever the door swung open for new arrivals. Perfume, cologne, and laughter spilled into the cold air. I stepped out of my car slowly, the black leather case in my hand with its red ribbon handle. The snow was salted off the path, carefully arranged to welcome, but only certain people. I walked alone toward the door. Inside, the foyer was heavy with coats, wine in glasses, the sound of introductions that never seemed to reach me. I moved past them quietly, boots soundless on polished wood. Heads turned, conversations faltered. I felt the air shift, the faint discomfort that trailed behind me like another shadow. The dining room was already full. 14 guests sat at a long table set with crystal and gold. Candles glowed, laughter rehearsed. At the far end stood Alyssa, in navy silk, porcelain smile just brittle enough to crack. She saw me, froze. Conversations broke mid-sentence. A fork clattered onto china. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. I stepped forward, set the leather case on the sideboard, and said, "Good evening, everyone." The words rippled outward, silencing the room. "I hope you don't mind," I continued, opening the latch. "I brought a few receipts." Alyssa's face tightened. "Helen, this isn't the time." "No," I agreed calmly, eyes steady on hers. "It's the truth, and truth tends to arrive when it's least convenient." She stepped forward. "This is inappropriate." I placed the first folder in front of Graham, then Celeste, then the neighbor Alyssa had bragged about hosting. "So is gratitude," I said, sliding another folder forward. I moved around the table, not hurried, not hesitant. Each folder bore a name. Each folder told a story. Bank transfers, gift letters, emails, dates, facts. Not accusations, just truth printed in black and white. Finally, I reached Noah, his face pale, his hands gripping the edge of the table. I placed the last folder in front of him. "This one," I said softly, "is in your name, because that's the one I trusted most." He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Pages rustled around the table. Wine glasses remained untouched. The background music kept playing, suddenly too cheerful, a lie humming beneath the silence. "Families pass down stories," I said, "but sometimes the story gets rewritten by whoever speaks the loudest. Tonight, I decided not to be erased." A voice cut in, measured and precise. "Where did the down payment come from?" It was Richard, the HOA attorney, seated midway down the table, his napkin still folded in his lap. He wasn't asking from curiosity. He wanted facts. The room froze. Alyssa stiffened. Graham blinked. Celeste turned her sharp eyes on Noah, who now pressed both palms down on the folder as if he could hold the truth shut. I turned back slowly. The down payment came from my retirement fund. August 14th, 5 years ago. Page 2, second line. Richard flipped pages, nodded once. "She's right." A whisper skated across the table. Someone said, "Oh my God." "There's also the mortgage letter," I continued evenly. "Page 3, where I signed a non-repayable gift declaration so the loan would close. and on page 5 a list of childcare, groceries, tuition, repairs, all with confirmation numbers from my bank. I looked around, voice steady. And if anyone here wonders about the so-called blizzard that left them stranded, page 7. Seattle's high that day was 52 degrees. There was a soft laugh from the far end, then silence again. As for the family trust, if you're wondering why access has been suspended, refer to clause 8.2. Eyes flicked to folders, pages turned fast, paper began to sound louder than the music. Noah's eyes finally rose to mine. Not angry, just opened. This was meant to be a private gathering, Alyssa said sharply. It was never private, I replied. Not after the newspaper, not after the voicemails, not after the seating chart that listed me as TBD. Richard's voice again, low but final. She's right. It's all here. Celeste's cheeks burned red. Graham leaned back, jaw tight, his spoon abandoned. Alyssa's lips parted, no words arriving. The performance was over. Dessert had arrived, and it was honesty. I closed the case gently. You fed on my silence, I said, calm as stone. Tonight you'll chew the facts. I looked at Noah one more time. I loved you. I still want the best for you, but I won't fund my own erasure. Then I nodded once to the table. Enjoy your dinner. It's the last one I'll ever pay for. I turned, walked out, boots soft against the polished tile. The warmth of truth followed me, and nothing I owed lingered in the air. 3 months later, a white envelope appeared in my mailbox, bold letters stamped, confidential from a bank I knew too well. I didn't open it right away. I brewed tea, strong and dark, and stood by the window watching spring edge into the neighborhood. Then I slid it with a butter knife, a notice of default. They had missed 3 payments on the line of credit tied to their house. Amount due, $8,400. Penalties compounding monthly. A polite paragraph outlined choices. Pay or escalation would begin. I read it twice. Not pleasure, not even triumph, just confirmation. They had built a life on borrowed presents, dressed it as tradition, floated it on other people's generosity. They never thought the ledger would be read aloud. Now the paper spoke what I had whispered alone in my kitchen. I folded it and slid it into a folder marked Postscript. No calls came, no apologies, no invitations, just silence. The good kind, the kind that follows clarity. Weeks passed. I spent them with a paintbrush in one hand and a small notebook in the other. My house needed care, not fixing, just love. The kind of care I had poured into other people's homes for years without offering it to my own. I replaced the old bulbs with warm LEDs, scrubbed fixtures until they gleamed, painted the walls in soft taupe and slate. The house brightened, one corner at a time. I planted roses along the walkway, though it was early for blooms. I didn't mind waiting. Some houses grow warmer once empty. The silence shifted. It no longer echoed. It stayed. The phone didn't ring with hollow requests. The mailbox didn't hold bills that weren't mine. One morning I stood in the doorway, coffee in hand, surveying fresh paint, flowers budding, sunlight warming the kitchen. Nothing extravagant, nothing curated, but everything was mine. Then came a knock, gentle, not demanding. I opened the door to see Rosa, my neighbor, cheeks pink from cold, holding a box of lemon muffins tied with twine. I baked too many, she said. We both knew it was a lie. I waved her in. Tea was already steeping. She didn't mention the paint, but her eyes scanned the room, stopping at the framed photo of Mark, the lilies, the golden light. It's quieter now, she said finally. Peaceful kind of quiet, I answered. Not the empty kind, she nodded. Strength. We ate muffins and drank tea. She handed me a flyer for a community fundraiser. We need someone good with numbers and strong tea. I smiled. I have both. That was the beginning of something small, but real. People came. They didn't ask about Noah. They didn't tiptoe around last names. They just thanked me for the cookies. A little girl bit into one and said, "This tastes like grandma hugs." I laughed, and for the first time in years, I believed her. Later, Rosa and I sat on the church steps, cocoa warming our hands. "Do you ever think about what makes a family?" I asked. She smiled softly. "Family are the ones who don't need you to shrink, the ones who make space." I thought of the long Queen Anne table with its velvet chairs, the chair I was never offered. "And when blood isn't that?" She looked at me without judgment. "Then you plant new roots. You don't keep returning to poisoned soil." That night, by firelight, I opened my journal. On the first page, I wrote 5 names: Rosa, Linda, Elise, Mark, me. Beneath them, family isn't blood. Family is who stays when it's quiet. I kept the journal open on the coffee table that night with the page of names showing, a small lantern of ink in the dim. The fire worked itself down to coals. The quiet in the house felt balanced, not hollow. I took the spare key to Noah's place from the little ceramic bowl near the door, the bowl that still holds our old house keys from the rental days, and turned it over in my palm until the metal warmed. I slid it into a padded envelope, wrote his name carefully on the front, and sealed it. I didn't add a note. Some messages don't need words to arrive. In the morning, I walked it to the blue box on the corner and let it clatter down the chute. The air was clean, the kind of Seattle morning that confuses the calendar, bright and thin with a promise it has no right to make. A kid on a scooter flashed by, squeaky wheel, helmet too big, and waved at me purely because we'd made eye contact. I waved back, and the wave felt like a stitch. On my way home, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go. A minute later, a voicemail landed. When I pressed play in the kitchen, a woman's voice came on, cool, careful. "Ms. Marlowe, this is Paige Lawson from the Seattle Herald. I received your email and attachments. I'd like to discuss. If you're willing, please call me back." No apology. Not yet. But the tone had changed from declarative to conditional. Paper does that to people. I boiled water and made tea before returning her call. She picked up on the second ring. "Ms. Lawson," I said, "you asked to discuss." "To verify," she corrected, and then more measured, "to correct, if verification holds." "It holds," I said. "You have the files." "I do," she said. "We also contacted Sound and Summit Fiduciary Services and confirmed your standing as trustee and the suspension. We confirmed the weather. We confirmed the call log via your carrier. Timestamps match." She hesitated. "We also reached your son and the Bakers for comment." "And?" I asked. "They declined," she said. Or more accurately, they circled. The word landed with a soft thud. "I'll be publishing a correction and an editor's note. It won't undo the first piece, but it will sit beside it." "Truth doesn't need to shout," I said. "It just needs a chair." "I'm sorry," she said after a beat, "for my part in rushing the first version. I didn't tell her I'd circled her name in red ink. I didn't tell her about the red ribbon on my leather case. I said, 'Thank you,' and meant it." The call ended without pleasantries, and that felt right. Some knots don't require bows. By lunchtime, the correction was live. People messaged screenshots, but I didn't click them. Rosa forwarded the link with a single line. "There you are." I texted back a teacup emoji and went outside to prune the little roses I'd planted too early. Their branches were thin. Their thorns were honest. When I finished, I came back in to find another message waiting on my porch. The envelope laid gently under the doormat like something skittish. I knew the handwriting before I bent to pick it up. "Mom," it began, "I don't deserve this space, but if you ever make tea again, I'd sit and listen." I read it twice. The second time, slowly enough for the ink to sink. The letter did not defend. It did not rehearse. It did not use the word, but like a life raft. He wrote about pressure and noise, about a house where applause came with strings attached, about the way he learned to survive by choosing the room that clapped louder. He wrote that he had missed the holiday, and the point. He ended with this: "I'm sorry, Mom. Love, Noah." I set the letter on the mantel beside the framed photo of Mark at the lake and stood there with one hand on the wood. I didn't cry. I breathed. The breath felt new, not careful or rationed, but full. I took the spare mug down from the shelf and washed it just in case. That was all I did. That was enough for a day. 3 days later, he texted, "Could we meet at Mercer and Pine? Sunday? I'll be there at 10. No demands, no insistence, a request with a time." I stared at the screen long enough for it to dim, woke it with my thumb, and typed 10:30. If I'm late, order tea. The cafe was one of those new builds with an exposed ceiling and plants that know their names. I arrived at 10:34 to find him inside the door, standing instead of sitting, like someone who wasn't sure whether he was allowed to appear relaxed. He had Mark's shoulders and my mouth and eyes that looked older than 35. When he saw me, he lifted his hand halfway, stopped, and then did something I didn't anticipate. He moved aside to hold the door open for another customer before he approached me. "Hi," he said, and the word was small. "Hi," I answered. We didn't hug. We got in line. He asked what I wanted. I said, "Black tea, plain." He ordered 2 and paid. We carried our cups to a table by the window. The city moved without noticing us. Good. We sat. He started, then stopped, then started again. "I'm sorry for that night," he said. "For the words. For all the words before it and the ones I didn't say when I should have." "I know," I said. Not forgiving yet. Not condoning, just acknowledging that truth had finally walked into the room and found a chair. He took a breath. Everything was always someone else's opinion. Alyssa's parents, their friends, the HOA. It's like I kept looking for the adult in the room, and somehow I decided it couldn't be you, because you didn't shout. "You mistook quiet for absence," I said. He nodded, forehead pinched. "I mistook money for love," he said, voice smaller. "Or maybe I mistook love for money. We built a life on the easy gasoline of everyone saying yes to us. You were always the tank we could fill without asking who owned the car." "Noah," I said, and I put one hand on my cup. "I'm not a fuel source. I'm a person, with limits." He winced, genuinely, the way a person does when a truth slides home. "I know," he said. "I see it now. He slowed. "I also made mistakes with the paper. I talked to someone I shouldn't have. I thought if I controlled the story first, I could soften the fall. It was wrong." "You tried to rewrite weather," I said. He smiled a little despite himself. "Yeah. Paper doesn't melt," I said, "but it can correct." He glanced at the window. The reflection of us in the glass looked like 2 people who hadn't slept much, but were willing to try something sober. "Alyssa left," he said finally. "Her parents said they'd cover the gap and then decided their generosity had conditions. She's with them for now. The line of credit is bleeding. The bank sent letters." "I know," I said. "They sent one to me by mistake. Old addresses have long arms." He swallowed. "I'm not asking you to fix it." "That's good," I said, and meant it down to my shoes. "I'm asking," he said, "how to fix me. The part that learned to eat with both hands and call it survival." We sat with that a moment. Steam thinned from our cups. He looked like the boy in the refrigerator box for half a second, wildness hidden under a wrong-sized sweater. Mark would have leaned back and found a practical first step. I did the same. Therapy, I said, and a budget you write with a pencil you can erase, and a job you don't hate, even if it pays less than the title you wanted on paper, and then time. Doing those things long enough to rewrite your story without using anybody else's ink. He nodded and made the smallest of relieved noises, like something unclenched in his throat. I also have conditions, I said, and now his eyes were fully on my face. Clear ones. The trust remains frozen until I see respect and responsibility, consistently. Not a week, not a month. I'm talking quarters and holidays and boring Tuesdays. You will not have access to me as a wallet. You will have access to me as a person if you act like one. If you need groceries, you can come over and eat. If you need help with the kids, ask in a voice that isn't entitled. If you want advice, accept hearing no. I reserve the right to say it more often than you like. He nodded again, slower. Okay. And, I said, you will contact the Herald and tell them what you told me about the story, about the weather you tried to change. He closed his eyes and exhaled. Okay. And, I added softer, you will not ask me to sit at any table where a chair is not offered before the food is plated. His mouth twitched in that lopsided way that used to make me laugh when he was 6. Okay. We drank tea. We talked practical. The mortgage, the credit line, the escrow account he'd ignored because numbers bored him, the way boredom can become a fuse. He asked me to look at a spreadsheet he'd begun, pencil scrawl and coffee stains along the edge. It wasn't elegant. It was honest. I suggested 2 new columns and scratched them in with my pen: interest, reality, and gratitude. He smirked at the second one. Measure gratitude? You write down daily one thing you appreciate that isn't transactional, I said. Gratitude that isn't followed by a request. He wrote the word down like someone practicing a new language. When our cups were empty and the city kept going, he stood. He didn't reach for a hug. He put both hands on the table as if that would help the words find their way out of his chest. I miss Dad, he said. It's like I hear him when I sleep and never when I'm awake. He never shouted, I said. You have to be quiet to hear him. I'm trying, he said, and there was a small sound on the last word that broke something tender in me, but not the kind of break that leaks, the kind that opens a door. I nodded once. Good, I said. Bring the kids by next Sunday for soup. If you're late, text me like you respect my time. He half laughed, half coughed. Okay. We walked out together and not together. He turned uphill. I went down. I didn't look back, and neither did he. We didn't need to. I felt the space stretch like dough, elastic, real, something you can work with if you keep your hands steady. The next week, the Herald printed a second correction, shorter, cleaner, with a quote from a family source, acknowledging the suspension of the trust and the factual weather. I clipped it, not to save, but to finish the file. Then I took the whole public record folder to my bedroom and put it on the top shelf. I didn't bury it. I didn't display it. It sat like a closed book you know by heart. Noah texted twice in the days that followed. Simple, proper texts. Can we come by at 2 on Sunday? I'll bring bread. And running 15 minutes late. I'll mop anything we spill. The second text made me smile and then laugh out loud when I realized he had learned to pre-apologize in practical terms. They arrived at 2:17. He knocked and waited instead of wandering in. The kids skidded past him as soon as I opened the door, all knees and toes and laughter. I had set the table with bowls and spoons and cloth napkins not because anyone important was coming, but because we were. The soup was hot. The bread was from a cheap place that tastes like memory. The kids argued over who got the blue cup. Noah took off his shoes without being asked and stood in the kitchen like he was making sure he belonged. "Smells like all the good winters," he said. "Eat before it cools," I said, because love can be a bowl as much as it is a sentence. We didn't talk about Alyssa. We didn't talk about the bank. We didn't talk about weather. We talked about second grade and how tooth fairies differ by zip code, about science projects and the Chinook winds. When soup was gone, Noah and the kids washed bowls together like a tiny choir. Splash, giggle, shush. And I wiped the table. I packed leftovers in a container that I didn't expect to see again and texted myself a note. "Don't lend dishes, you'll mourn." After they left, Rosa came by with a geranium in a chipped pot and set it on my stoop like a stamp of approval. "He looked like a person who wants to be better," she said. "He looked like my kid," I said. "Same thing if you let time work," she said. I started walking in the mornings, not far, down to the park and back, past dogs who believe in joy and people who never learned to scowl properly before coffee. A week into it, I found Mark's old hand plane in the garage and cleaned it with steel wool until the metal shone like an old coin. I didn't need it for anything. I put it on the mantel because it made sense there, a line from then to now. At the fundraiser, they put me in charge of the cash box and the awkward conversations no one else wanted to take on. I found I was good at both. People listened when I spoke softly and handed them a receipt. I brought lemon shortbread again, and the same little girl from last time traded $2 and a gap-toothed grin for 1 square, then came back later with a friend and a pocket full of gravel. "We can pay in rocks?" she asked. "You can pay in a drawing," I bargained. She returned with a picture of a house, slanted and bright with windows. Underneath she'd written Helen in determined letters. I almost corrected the spelling and then didn't. I put it on the fridge with a magnet shaped like an avocado. After the fundraiser wound down, Rosa and I stacked folding chairs and tallied numbers. "We did it," she said. "You did it," I corrected. She shrugged. "We both did it, like always, only now you show up with your name tag on." On the way home, my phone buzzed again, a number saved as Carla, fiduciary. "Miss Marlowe," she said when I answered, "I wanted you to be aware that a formal request came from Mr. Marlowe to review conditions for reinstatement." "I expected that," I said. "I also need to inform you," she added, "that the Bakers attempted to contact our office about the trust. We declined to discuss and documented the attempt." "Noted," I said. "If reinstatement is considered, it will follow written criteria authored by me, reviewed by counsel, and agreed to by Noah with signatures." I heard my own voice and realized I sounded like a boardroom and a front porch at once. "Understood," she said, with the faintest warmth I'd heard yet. "For what it's worth, your file is very orderly." "Paper is just a memory with corners," I said. "I finally learned to keep mine straight. Have a good evening, Ms. Marlowe." "You too, Carla." Spring came the Seattle way, 2 steps forward, 1 back, a jacket you shouldn't have put away just yet. I painted the garden chairs the color of wet sand because I like how ordinary looks when it's cared for. Linda across the street brought over jam and asked, "Easter plans?" I said not yet. She said, "We've got room and real forks." We laughed like people who know the joke underneath that sentence. On a Tuesday, Noah texted a photo of the kids at the library, both asleep in a pile of beanbags, books tented over their bellies. He wrote nothing else. He didn't need to. The next Sunday, when they came for soup, he arrived with a notepad. "Budget," he said. "And the number for a therapist. Went twice already. It's hard. Feels like sanding, and I hate sanding." "Your father loved sanding," I said. "He used to hum because the work was both the music and the instrument." "I don't hum," he said. You could, I said. We went through the numbers. He listened without arguing. When he pushed back, it was on the part that asked him to put a little in a jar labeled Quiet Joy every month, $5, 10, money meant for cocoa or sidewalks or a matinee, something that buys nothing necessary and prevents famine in the soul. Why, he asked, suspicious as someone who's been burned by pleasure. Because austerity pretends to be virtue and then rots, I said. You need to remember life is still allowed. He wrote it down. Quiet joy. Later, when the kids were coloring, he asked, Do you think you'll ever unfreeze it? The trust, I said. Maybe, if I see the person it was meant to protect and steady, not the performance the room clapped for. He nodded and didn't ask for a timeline. I like that answer more than I would have liked a date. We had one slant day where rain came sideways and made every decision feel wrong. That afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. We won't forget what you did. No punctuation, no signature. Alyssa's parents again, or someone who thinks they are a weather system. I took a picture of the text and emailed it to Carla with a single line. For the record. Then I deleted it. I did not let it live on my phone like a ghost in the attic. On a gentler day, a package arrived. No return address. Inside, the newspaper correction laminated, as if intended to last, and a short note in tidy cursive. We get some things wrong. Good editors live for the second chance. P.L. I smiled and slid the laminate into the public record folder, then put the entire file into a banker's box labeled with a piece of blue painter's tape. Closed, but kept. The roses finally put out 2 brave blooms in late May. The petals looked like something soft that remembered it once was harder. I clipped one and placed it beside Mark's photo. Look, I told him, which is something I do sometimes when the house is too quiet and I need the rhythm of an old conversation. I set the kettle, took down 2 mugs out of habit, and put one back with a soft laugh. By June, the letters from the bank to the bakers had stopped coming to me. By July, the line of credit at their address had a new co-signer, not me. I learned this because Noah asked me to look over a document, and I did. Blue pen out, eyes clean. He had negotiated a modest refinance with the help of a credit counselor who cared more about math than appearance. The signatures lined up. The numbers did too. When he slid the final page across my table for a second look, I signed nothing and handed him a bowl of cherries. You did this, I said. He put one cherry stem in his mouth and tied a knot without thinking. He always could. I did, he said quietly, and then he looked younger than his real age for a heartbeat. We hosted the bake table again. The little girl with the determined letters came back, older by a missing tooth and a new haircut. She held up another drawing. My house, still slanted, now with a rose bush as big as a tree and 4 stick people on the porch, 1 tall, 2 medium, 1 small. She'd written Helen right this time, and underneath, home. I offered to pay her for the art with a cookie. She told me art should be free for people who know how to hold it. I gave her 2 cookies and told her she'd just described the entire point of love. On a Sunday evening in August, after a day that smelled like sunscreen and library air conditioning, Noah and the kids came over with a Tupperware of brownies. We ate them with milk and pretended we were meeting them for the first time, then admitted we were not, and ate another. The kids ran in loops in the yard. Noah helped me carry a chair from the garage to the porch without being asked, then stayed with his hand on the back of it, like that made it his in the right way. He looked toward the fireplace inside and then back at me. Does it ever feel like it's done? He asked. The mending? No, I said. It feels like knitting. You pull the yarn through, loop by loop, Some nights you drop a stitch and have to find your way back. It's never done. It's warmer every time you sit under it. Dad would have said something better, he said. Dad would have said the same thing and then stained the porch, I said. We both laughed. The laugh didn't hurt. It landed like weight where weight is supposed to sit. When they left, he didn't linger in the doorway in a way that asked for anything. He stood straight, the kids loaded with leftovers, the brownies in a tin. I didn't care if I got back. He said, "Thanks for dinner, Mom," the way a person says thank you to a person, not to a faucet, not to a vault, to someone who made soup and meant it. After they drove off, I sat on the porch a long time, long enough to watch the sky make decisions it refused to explain. The rosebush moved in a wind that didn't reach the ground. Across the street, Linda turned on her porch light and waved with her whole arm. I waved back, less dramatically, because that's our choreography. The house hummed behind me with the low, clean buzz of a place at peace. I went inside, washed the plates, and set 2 mugs on the counter. One I returned to the shelf, the other I left out for morning. In the living room, I opened the drawer with the trust binder and rested my hand on the cover. I did not open it. I didn't need to. The power in paper is not the sound it makes when you flip the page. It's the sound your life stops making when you stop erasing yourself. Before bed, I wrote in my journal under the 5 names. Add 2 more. Noah, children. Then, a line underneath. Not straight, because I'm done pretending lines must be. Boundaries are fences. Fences have gates. Gates swing on hinges that like to be oiled. I closed the book and set it on the mantel next to the hand plane and the rose. 3 objects: work, love, bloom. In the morning, the city woke to a version of itself I could finally live inside without flinching. The paper still ran stories with angles. The bakers still hosted dinners with place cards that meant something. The world didn't apologize. It didn't need to. I had my house. I had new roots. I had a son who knocked, and a table that sat people who showed up with their hands and their hearts, not their invoices. When I opened the curtains, a line of sun fell across the floor exactly where Mark used to put his boots, and I said out loud to an empty room, "Look," because some habits are prayers. I made tea. I buttered toast. I answered an email from Carla with a draft of conditions for eventual review, written in plain language I could read when I was tired. I texted Rosa a photo of the second rose. I sent Noah an article about compound interest with the caption read, "Then call." He called. We spoke briefly, like people who have more time and aren't afraid to use it slowly. The kettle clicked. The house held warm. The snow that had once tried to muffle the season months back had melted into a city that carried footsteps and voices, and the kind of quiet that lets you hear both. I stood in that quiet and understood the simplest, hardest lesson. Love without respect is just a purchase. But love with boundaries? That's a home. I took my tea to the porch and sat. The world moved around me. I did not feel erased. I felt here. I felt exactly, finally, here. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story. Your support means the world. If you enjoyed it, please remember to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one, and give this video a like to help others find it. I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Share your city in the comments below. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. Until next time, take care, and I'll see you in the next story.